So you want to get your fear behind you, right? You want to get it behind you where it's pushing you forward instead of in front of you where it's stopping you. The idea, the modern idea is you're supposed to accept yourself. I think that's an insane idea, by the way. Really, I can't think of a more nihilistic idea than that you're already okay. It's like, no, you're not. And the reason you're not is because you could be way more than you are. And so what do you want to be? You want to be okay as you are? Or do you want to strive towards what's better? It's Bilbo in The Hobbit. You know, he's kind of this little underdeveloped, overprotected Shire dweller. And he's called on a great adventure to go and find the dragon. And he has to become a thief in order to manage it. Well, that's pretty weird, you know. It's like, well, it's because as a good citizen, he's just not enough to conquer a dragon. He has to also become a bad citizen in some sense. He has to incorporate the part of himself that's monstrous, let's say, and develop that and hone it. And that's to say that, well, if you're harmless, you're not virtuous. You're just harmless. You're like a rabbit. A rabbit isn't virtuous. It just can't do anything except get eaten. It's not virtuous. If you're a monster and you don't act monstrously, then you're virtuous. It does matter how you meet someone, and it does matter how you treat them when you first meet them. And it's amazing. I've learned to do this, at least in part, partly because I'm a clinical psychologist. I've learned how to talk to people very rapidly. And I have the most amazing adventures with people in cabs and when I travel, because I'll talk to them directly right away, and they'll tell me the wildest stories and show me the craziest things because I'm actually interested in what they have to say. And I'm not afraid. Well, I'm somewhat afraid, but I'm not sufficiently afraid to have that stop me. And I'm acting on the presupposition that the person has something of great interest to reveal. And that's a very useful thing to know too, because one of the things that's really cool about people, and you really learn this as a clinical psychologist, is that if you can get people talking, they're so damn interesting you can hardly stand it. You know, because they have these idiosyncratic experiences that are only theirs, right? They're only theirs personally. No one else could tell the story, and that's the kind of stories that you want to hear. And when they tell you those stories, you learn something you didn't know. And so what that means is that you can treat the landscape of strangers as an endless vista of places to learn things you didn't know. If you ask a disagreeable person what he wants, say, or she wants, they'll tell you right away. They know. It's like, this is what I want, and this is how I'm going to get it. But agreeable people, especially if they're really agreeable, are so agreeable that they often don't even know what they want, because they're so accustomed to living for other people and to finding out what other people want and to trying to make them comfortable and so forth, that it's harder for them to find a sense of their own desires as they move through life. And that's not, look, there's situations where that's advantageous, but it's certainly not advantageous if you're going to try to forge yourself a career. That just doesn't work at all. But one of the main reasons that people don't get what they want is because they don't actually figure out what it is. But maybe you could get what would really be good for you. Well, why don't you? Well, because you don't try. Imagine that you were taking care of yourself like you were someone you actually cared for. And then you thought, okay, I'm caring for this person. I would like things to go as well for them as possible. What would their life have to be like in order for that to be the case? But you have to figure out what it is, and then you have to aim at it. Well, my experience with people has been if they figure out what it is that would be good for them, and then they aim at it, then they get it. You know, if you watch movies, there's always this beta male guy, if they're romantic movies, and he's a nice guy, and he's the friend, and you know, the woman tells him everything, but she doesn't like him a bit. She likes the guy who's like got an edge, and who's capable of, I would say, mayhem, but at least of aggression. Now, that doesn't mean she wants him to be aggressive, but what it does mean is that she wants him to be able to be aggressive. That would be good. And so he's the romantic target, and so he's the person that's incorporated the shadow, and he's someone that is respectable and perhaps useful. The idea is that if you're the sort of person who can stand up against the unknown and the frightening, then you're also likely, if you develop into that sort of person, then you're also likely to develop into the sort of person that other people will find attractive. And one of the things I tell agreeable people, especially if they're conscientious, is say what you think. Tell the truth about what you think. There's going to be things you think that you think are nasty and harsh, and they probably are nasty and harsh, but they're also probably true. And you need to bring those up to the forefront and deliver the message. And it's not straightforward at all, because agreeable people do not like conflict. Not at all. They smooth the water. It takes a lot of conflict to solve problems in the short term. And if that can spiral up to where it's dangerous, which it can if it gets uncontrolled, it might be safer in the short term to keep the waters smooth and to not delve into those situations where conflict emerges. The problem with that is it's not a very good medium to long-term strategy, right? Because lots of times there are things you have to talk about because they're not going to go away. And so then you might say, well, how motivated is a hungry rat? And the answer would be, depends on how hungry he is. But there's another answer. It also depends on what's chasing him when he's going after the food. So if you have a rat and you have food over here and you waft in some cat odor, rats hate cat odor and it's innate. They never have to see or smell a cat to be absolutely petrified by cat odor. And so if you waft in some cat odor and then open the door, that rat will zoom to that food a lot faster than it will if it's just hungry. So a rat running away from something that it doesn't want towards something that it does want is a very motivated rat. Negative emotion is a really powerful motivator. So we're more motivated by negative emotion than positive emotion. That's, I think, because we can only be so happy, but we can really be suffering and dead, So we have to pay more attention to the negative. And that's bad because the negative can stop you. This is also, I think, why it's so useful to contemplate your mortality, so to speak, is you're screwed no matter what you do. And that actually frees you, is that you have path A that has catastrophes and you have path B that has catastrophes, and you don't get to have the no catastrophe path, but you get to pick which one. And that's really something, because if you know that there's terrible risk associated with everything that you do and don't do, then you can afford to take some risk. You can make a covenant with the highest ideal, and that will take you through it the best way possible. And so then the temptation comes along and you think, oh, how about no? Seriously, how about no? Not just because a higher good would be obtained if I avoided it, but because a terrible catastrophe would be averted if I didn't. And so you want to get your fear behind you, right? You want to get it behind you where it's pushing you forward instead of in front of you where it's stopping you. And you get your fear behind you, pushing you forward by actually thinking through the consequences of not putting your life together.